Hey guys, here at Day and Night Studio, we've been talking a lot about gesture drawings and drawing the human figure while keeping all these proportions in check. A lot of students rush at the opportunity to draw the figure, but they sometimes will forget this first step, which is take a couple of minutes and just study what you're about to draw. Every time you look away from your reference image, you forget a little bit. So taking a little bit of time to just notice things around the image or around your setup or the gesture that you're drawing will save you in the long run. So try your best to not skip this step. So I'm looking for little negative spaces. I'm extending some lines so that I give her an anchor. That helps me keep the body from tipping over or leaning or stretching. So I want to get her in that pose that we see her in right there without making her look like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Don't want any lean in there. I'm also going to use the head as a measuring tool, and that's a classic form of proportion for the human figure. Is a human figure is 7 heads tall. So I want to keep her looking as close to that as I can. Now, I'm not a human copy machine, and I try not to emphasize that too much in class, that we don't have to copy every little thing, but keeping the figure in correct proportion is not something I'm willing to deviate from. We have to keep that structure correct. And I remind my students all the time, make sure you're using those accuracy tools. The acronym we use in class is the word MEN, M-E-N. We measure and compare, we extend lines, and we use negative space. Within those 3 methods, you can narrow down 90% of any proportion, problems, or basic underdrawing issues. Now, I'm not talking about value and shading, I'm just talking about getting the structure laid out. Those 3 things can help you a lot. And I usually work from the head and then I go downward on the paper, because I find that if I just start somewhere in the middle, I will usually run out of room either at the top or the bottom. So at least start at the top with the head and try to use that as a measuring tool, the head, as I go forward. Also, aware of all this pattern on her clothing. Her costume is covered in textural differences, geometric patterns, belts, buckles, straps. She's just covered with stuff. And I think that's why not a lot of people in my class actually chose this image out of all the ones I offered. I think they actually chose some other ones that had some, like suit and tie and dress on. They didn't choose this one. I just thought it was really an exciting pose. It's dynamic. She has a really good energy, and you can see the figure really well. This is a really form-fitting costume, which I'm sure, the producers of the Guardians of the Galaxy thought all about this outfit. And me drawing it on this video was really not in their mind when they designed this, but I think it's fascinating, and I love the way that each little portion of pattern difference and texture variety actually helps me build this figure more, because it does what we should do with any big problem, is break it down into smaller little shapes or take it one little step at a time. So as I'm drawing her, the pattern and all the little gadgets that are all over this costume actually worked to my benefit. because I was able to say, okay, well, there's this little shape, and next to that is this triangle, and next to that is, a belt. So it doesn't leave a lot of empty room for me to get lost. With that said, I still didn't make it perfectly, but I was able to navigate around this really easily because of so many landmarks, is what I call those little things that I can say above or below or beside, kind of directional items on her clothing. I'm also aware of the skeleton underneath. Going to school and learning about all of the anatomy is extremely helpful. So I also want to make sure that each area that would have a solid structure or a bone and not be bending isn't. My students sometimes will have problems with that because they'll try to draw the outline of the leg instead of building it on a structure like a straight edge or an angle. They'll just start outlining the leg, and it ends up looking kind of noodle-like, very noodly and wiggly. So you'll see that I'm using very angular lines. I'm trying to keep my lines really straight. Because of that, I'm less likely to bend the leg in some weird way. So I'm making my way down her figure, trying to get to these boots. I love this negative space between the knees and this calf. If you get that little space right, this like little harp shape that her legs are making, if you get that right, you will get a lot right. And if you get it wrong, there's potential for a lot to go wrong. Those little negative spaces, I sometimes nickname them or refer to them as little keyholes or a puzzle piece. So look out for those. They're not shortcuts, but if you recognize them, it will save you some time and maybe some correction. You'll notice that as I'm drawing, I'm not really erasing. Everything looks kind of hairy and sketchy. Artists don't do that because it looks necessarily cool. It does have a confidence to it because you are leaving some, mistakes there, I guess. But it's really to save time by not erasing, because I know that I'm going to have to shade this whole figure, and a lot of those lines will be absorbed in what I shade. And as I shade, I'm going to use my blending stick, my blending stump, to map in some of the shadows. What you can't tell in this video right now is that I'm squinting at this image. When you blur your eyes and look at this image, you can blur away or ignore a lot of detail. I couldn't really ignore her waistline belt. That was still visible even when I squinted. But I could see a shadow kind of behind her on the left side, so I wanted to get that in. And I'm just slowly mapping out a little bit more. I'm finding my darks. What shading will do for you as you draw, it will either confirm or deny your correct proportion. So if you got something wrong, when you start putting in the shadow shapes, it won't line up. You'll be like, oh man, I didn't even notice that. And then all of a sudden you had to change something. And then you get to another area and you're shading and the shadow is bigger than what you have space for, and then you decide, oh no, that doesn't fit either. And then all of a sudden you have a really frustrated beginner who is realizing their underdrawing wasn't as close as they thought it was to the reference. But if you took your time on your underdrawing, if you used all those accuracy tools, measuring and comparing, extending a line, seeing that negative space, there's a good chance that most of it is close enough to where a little tiny push in the other direction fixes it. So I think that that's what I find most when I'm teaching figure drawing. It's really not all that different than when we were practicing drawing apples and pears and bottles and boxes. All of those basic still life drawing skills come roaring back when we are practicing drawing the figure. It is just multiplied exponentially with the figure, because with the figure you take all of those geometric aspects, which you can break down the figure into cylinders and boxes and things like that, and then you compile clothing, and in Nebula's case, like 20 belts and a gun and like this, mechanical head piece. So when you add all of the extras that there are with the human body, it's just fascinating and compelling, but it's also mind-bogglingly complicated. But that's why I think artists just keep at it. There's endless possibility. And when you become proficient, there's almost nothing more fun than doing a figure drawing well. It's just a lot of gratification that comes with it. So I really encourage you, even if you just have a picture of something that you are excited about drawing, try it out. You will get better. That's what I keep telling my students. Hey, you're improving a little every time. If you're really putting genuine practice into it, you are getting better. I sometimes joke, but your teacher keeps making it harder. So I do, keep increasing the weight of the assignments. We can't just draw apples forever, or pears, or boxes, but we have to include this complex unit, which is figures. So if you're out there and you love watching people draw and you would love to be able to do it yourself, it is a skill you can learn. So jump into it and get started. Well, this is one of the most fun drawings that I've done lately, and I'm so glad that I got to share with you guys. I hope you learned something. Please come back, subscribe, like, and have a blessed day.